What's up, you guys and girls? Thank you for joining us today for a very special episode of Global Nerdz podcast. Of course, we always audio, but today we got a special guest. So we in video form for YouTube for you guys. We got the man himself, Simon Bennett, joining us today. How are you doing, sir?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me on your podcast.
No, it is really a pleasure having you. I am Darrell, of course. Then we have Mark and we have Deshaun joining us today.
Hello.
Hey, let's get into it though. I want to start with the first question going way back. Like, what got you started in the film business? Like, what piqued your interest to be like, oh, I want to do this?
Good question. I could talk for hours about that, but I won't. I started in theatre when I was a child. My parents ran a mime company, basically white-faced Marcel Marceau type mime, and I travelled all over the country and around the Pacific doing lights and sound for them, operating shows. So that was my childhood background. It was deeply embarrassing as a teenager to have parents who performed white-faced mime, but I got over it and started doing drama at university. Gave up on the law degree and finished with a degree in theatre and film because I found something that I really loved and enjoyed doing. And it became like a flash of light, this is my vocation moment. And I discovered that directing was my first love. And shortly after that, I went to drama school and trained as an actor at the New Zealand Drama School. Always wanting to be a director. I hated acting. I found it deeply embarrassing, and creative movement was something that just made me want to curl up in the corner and cry. I spent 10 years as a theatre director, directing shows everywhere, big theatres, small theatres. My favourite shows were Shakespeare productions and Sondheim musicals. So I directed some large-scale professional shows. I was married by the end of that 10 years, and there was no way I was ever going to have any kind of financial stability if I stayed doing theatre, because life as a freelance theatre director is an impoverished one. And I saw an ad in the paper for a course that was being run by a company called South Pacific Pictures that was looking for trainee directors for their soap opera, which is called Shorten Street, which is 5 nights a week in New Zealand. So it's a fast turnaround soap. But yeah, they write, make, shoot, deliver 5 episodes a week for I think it's 50 weeks of the year. And I did that 3-month course and found that what I loved about theatre, which was working with actors, understanding scripts, making stories come alive, was stuff that I could translate into screen work. And because I've always had a kind of technical mindset, the technical aspects of film and TV were not at all intimidating, and I actually really loved that aspect of things. In the theatre, my favorite time was during technical rehearsals, where you're packing the show into the theatre and you're getting the lights and the sound and the costumes and all those elements to come together in a very short period of time. Being on set directing is very like that experience in theatre. So after a year directing a soap, I became producer of that show. I was offered the producer role, so I was running the show, and then I became head of drama at South Pacific Pictures and was in charge of a whole lot of different shows that company made, none of which you've probably heard of in the States. Not just kids shows, but adult dramas as well. I directed across 5 seasons of a show called Outrageous Fortune that was very successful here. Directed a feature film and a telefeature, and then struck out as a sort of freelancer after a while, mixing, going back into doing theatre shows occasionally just because that's my passion, and freelancing in the screen industry. And eventually I went knocking on Chip Lynn's door, who was the then executive producer of Power Rangers, and got an interview, and he offered me a directing gig on, what was the season? It was Ninja Steel. And that was a huge learning curve, because although I love technical stuff, I'd never done anything quite on the technical scale of Power Rangers with multiple units and stunts and visual effects. And it's still a fast show, and you have to roll with the punches and make decisions and change your plans really quickly because of weather or whatever might happen on set. That means you have to change things. But I love the kind of craziness of the show and the fact that it's essentially good-natured and fun. And there's a childlike aspect to it that makes working on the show never a drudgery. It's always uplifting. And from a show making point of view, every script sort of throws up unique challenges. How to make this gag stunt sequence work in the time you've got with the resources you've got. It will work fine in an animated cartoon, but you've got to make it happen in real life for the camera, and that's just a lot of fun, and it requires inventiveness and ingenuity. And then when Chip left at the end of Beast Morphers, because I was one of the main directors on Beast Morphers, and he kind of shoulder tapped me and said, "I think you've got the kind of background and understanding of how it all works to do this job. Might you be interested?" And I said, "Yeah, I would love to do that job," because I've been sort of watching what Chip was doing and thinking that because in my work history, as well as being a director, I've been a kind of creative executive producer. So I understand how all the aspects of production work and can speak to all the various creative heads of department in words that make sense to them. I jumped at the chance, and as chance would have it, the various executives from Hasbro and Saban happened to be in New Zealand at the time, and I was whisked off a recce it was middle of summer in my kind of sweaty t-shirt to interviews in a very flash hotel in downtown Auckland without any chance to prepare or think about what I was going to say, but I must have said the right thing because I ended up getting the job, and I've really, really enjoyed it. Like, I love the people I work with, and I love the creativity involved in making this show, and trying to keep it fresh and exciting for viewers. So that's a long ramble, but not half an hour.
That's a good thing. I like hearing that because it seems like your job isn't a job for you. It's like a passion instead of just a paycheck. And I like hearing that.
I'm really, really lucky because I'm one of those people who've been able to make a really good career out of doing what I would do for nothing because it's the thing I like doing most anyway. So yeah, I'm really, really lucky.
Go ahead, Mark.
I'm looking for questions. I wrote a ton of them.
He did. He had like a whole book. I was like, dude, we got like 30 minutes. This is not
I was going to just ask really questions. I'm like pulling them up because they were questions that I was just like, oh, this would be really good to ask. So let me scroll up and look this way. So, okay, one that's just here. So obviously you see the Sentai. Do you watch the Sentai and then take inspiration from it? Because I know it's not a carbon copy or anything, but you just go, I like that story. I'm going to go for that.
Well, we watched the Sentai. I mean, one of the first things that is decided really is which is the Sentai season that's going to be adapted next, historically. And a lot of that's to do with what do the suits and the Zords look like, and are they things that are going to be marketable as toys in the American market mainly. And that is a really strong decider on which season gets adapted. And then the next question really is, okay, with this raw material, what are the themes that we see that we could incorporate into our own show? We don't try and adapt necessarily the story or the Japanese themes, but for instance, with Dino Fury, there was obviously a really strong night theme that we had to accommodate because it was right through all the footage that we'd be using, but also we liked it. We thought it was cool and it was something that we hadn't seen before in Power Rangers. And then it's a very kind of methodical approach, but I used to sit down with Baker and Alwyn once a week and we would watch the Ryusoulger episodes as they became available online because we didn't have them in advance. So as we were writing the show, we were watching the show from Japan week by week. And we were hoping that there was going to be a spectacular villain at the end of the season because we didn't know what the show would deliver. So what they do is you look at what are the usable bits of footage, i.e. that don't show civilian faces, that are exciting, good action pieces, And historically, that's been ground fights and Zord and Megazord fights. And then you have to think about things like, can we match that location in New Zealand, or is it something that's just going to be completely impossible to match? Because usually we shoot portions of the fights to suit the story that we're telling. And then it's okay, we've got this theme, we've got these particular groups of rangers. Black and green seem to be slightly apart from the others in footage. There must be a reason for that. Let's come up with a reason. They're brother and sister, they arrive later. So looking at the dynamics within the ranger teams in Sentai, we translate that into possible character ideas and story ideas for Power Rangers. But the premise for Dino Fury, you know, the idea of Void Knight and Dino Henge and Amelia being a ghost hunter and what became of her parents and what was the backstory of Santora and Tarek, you know, all those kinds of things that we're playing with are completely original. And they're things that we as a creative team like and want to explore. There are other aspects of Sentai that we simply couldn't adapt or wouldn't adapt because they don't seem right for the target audience in America. For instance, the idea in Ryu Soldier that what creates the large monsters is basically globs of misery from depressed people. Isn't a great idea for 6-year-old kids. It's basically saying the world is a really grim place and full of desperate and despairing people. So the mechanism of where the monsters came from and how they grew big was something that we created afresh for that season. So that's just giving you an example of kind of how it works. You start with the designs, and then you look at the bits of footage that you can use and whatever clues that might give you about characters or possible story ideas, and then you come up with something completely different that can accommodate or involve all those things. And yeah, I'm just going to show you something here. Won't be a spoiler. It won't be a spoiler because all the little cards you can see relate to episodes that exist. But each of those cards has a Ryu Soldier episode, the amount of usable footage that's in it, the monsters that appear in that episode, the rangers that appear in footage, any elements like new keys or new power-ups that might appear in that episode, which ranger character focus is in the episode, like it might be a red ranger focused episode or a blue ranger focused episode, the general our name for the episode, which relates to the story. The actual episode names come a bit later. And yeah, it's a thumbnail. I can look at any one of those and know immediately which episode it was out of the 44, what happens in the episode, who's in it, what the monsters were, and it's a good trigger for me. But creating that kind of template is one of the first things the writers do, which is why I say it's quite kind of mathematical.
It is. It's fascinating because I never knew that you guys had to formulate a whole puzzle with missing pieces. Like that is crazy. I did not know that.
And when you shoot the show as a director, it's a jigsaw puzzle with missing pieces, and your job is to make the pieces that fit perfectly in the holes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Good job.
That makes sense. What's your, other than Power Ranger, right? What's your most rewarding project you ever done?
Oh, he went there.
That's a really good question. Actually, there are some theatre shows like that. I directed Sondheim's musical Into the Woods, which is adaptation of lots of fairy tales, all happening at the same time, with fictitious one mixed in with the real ones, in 1994. And it was one of those glorious productions where everything went right. It was really successful. The cast were fantastic. And I got married during the season, and we had our wedding reception in the foyer of the theatre while the show was running. So that was a great memory for me.
Yeah, that's
Outrageous Fortune, which is a New Zealand adult drama, which I directed, I think, I can't remember, at least 25 episodes of, hour-long drama, was really rewarding because it was very successful here and in Australia and had a big following. And it was nice to be riding the wave of something that was a big hit. Because film and TV can reach a much wider audience than theatre can, and when something really works, it's a very rewarding experience, particularly when you can gauge what people are saying about the show via Twitter or YouTube or whatever it might be. Because I'm very interested in how people who watch the show receive it, because it tells me whether we're getting it right or not. And I've said this before, but when you're in theatre, sitting in an audience, you can feel how the audience is reacting to the show on stage. You know if the jokes are working because the audience laughs. You know if they're bored because they start to fidget. You know if they're on the edge of their seat because they lean forward, or sometimes an entire room full of people can gasp at the same time. You don't get that with screen work. So the equivalent of reading the audience, because being able to do that is how you make your next work better, because if you hear criticism and assess what it means and whether you agree with it or not, then you can fold it into the work you do next. And I think that's quite important, because another thing for me is I always want to keep growing and learning. I don't want to ever kind of stop or just repeat what I'm doing, because that would be boring. I'm not interested in that at all. I'd rather leave something and do something else than feel I was just repeating myself.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. It's always good to grow, not stay in the same spot.
Exactly.
I always say never get comfortable at your same spot.
True. I want to get to like the creative side, because that's my interest there. So what's the differences between a director and a showrunner?
We have multiple directors on a show like Power Rangers. Each director is responsible for a block of episodes, normally 3, occasionally 2, and occasionally 4 episodes are being shot at the same time in a block. And a 3-episode block would be filmed across 9 shooting days with 2 units. Like, we have a second unit director and the main unit director. So the director picks up the scripts when they're written and finished, and works with the actors who are already cast and the costumes that are already designed and the sets that are already designed. And the director's job is to work out how to shoot the scenes in the time frame allowed, with the resources allowed, in as interesting a way as possible, and capture the scenes for post-production. And then the director will spend 3 days in post doing a director's cut, and then it gets handed over to me. I work on the show for the year or so before the director even starts. So I'm working with the writers on the scripts, I'm working on the designs, I'm working on the sets, the locations, the stories, and then I hand it over to the director to shoot, and then I pick it back off the director and I finish the edit, the fine cutting, and I oversee the visual effects and the music and the sound mix and the grade and all those post-production things that go on for many months after the shoot is actually finished. So I also brief the director. Like, I have a meeting with the director when they start, and I'll go through each script in detail, explaining what's important here, where the focus should be, and what the backstory might be that they may not otherwise be aware of for the characters. And I watch the rushes every day. So if anything I feel is not quite right, I will talk to the director about that while they're shooting. I go out for lunch on set most days and have a touch base meeting with the director. And my favorite thing of all is when I actually get to direct myself, which I managed to do on the last 2 episodes of Dino Fury, which I was very excited about. Does that kind of explain the difference?
It does, because I didn't really understand the differences between a director. I knew what a showrunner did, but it sounds like when you combine the two, you more of like the Kevin Feige of like Power Rangers, if you think about it. Because that's a lot of responsibility there.
It's a lot of responsibility, and you have to be confident, I think, to be able to do it. But again, it is that thing that it's what I've done all my adult life, and I believe that I'm good at it, and it's my vocation. So I don't let, if I let nerves get to me, if I let anxiety get to me about it, I wouldn't be able to do the job. It's kind of the one area in my life where I don't get anxious, I think would be fair to say. So it's therapeutic.
That's a lot. I'm sorry, Mark.
Oh no, it's fine. I was just gauging when I could speak. So you've done quite a lot of callbacks, like so you had like the Morphing Masters, then you used like the Nexus Prism to bring in like say the Dino Gems. So you've done like loads of little like tidbits, cameos, whatever. Like, are there things that you've put in that you've gone, no one thought of that? Because like the Morphing Masters was something that was in my morphing for like 2-3 episodes. So did you go back and look at episodes and go, I like that, and that's going in my show?
No, to be fair, the Morphin Masters were a Chip Lynn idea. It was one of his parting gifts to the franchise. And that was because one of the big concerns at the time was just the lack of continuity between seasons. The fact that we had all these Power Rangers seasons involving different actors, a different kind of premise, different morphers, different MacGuffins. How are they all joined? What is it that they have in common? Are they all in their own universe, or do they all coexist? Questions like that had never actually been resolved. And so if you did try and impose a logical continuity on the entire canon of Power Rangers, it became a very difficult job. And I did see an essay someone had written once explaining about all the different universes and pocket universes and semi-universes that might exist within the Power Rangers world. And if someone who wasn't a completely immersed fan was to watch the show and grapple with that, it would just be quite confusing and nonsensical. So the point of bringing the Morphin Masters in was really try and explain some kind of overarching influence that some kind of power connected to the grid had on the world that had created all these Ranger teams through history. And it was really to try and impose retrospectively some sort of continuity where previously none had existed. And the reason we like to drop all those little references, like the Nexus Prism, and there are lots of smaller throwbacks in Dino Fury, it's a little reward for the loyal fans. People like it because they recognize it and go, aha, I know what you're doing there. And it's fun. Yeah. But also it does help create the sense that this is a coherent world rather than just a whole lot of random stuff that no one has thought through. And which makes Power Rangers seem a little bit more realistic and a little bit more important, I think, rather than it being something that has no connection with its own history. And I guess the third reason we do stuff like that is we have the sets and the props and the costumes. So, we've got the Nexus Prism, we hauled it out of a warehouse and recycled it. And it actually, when we used it as part of the explanation of how the Morphin Masters worked, and the fact that it had, as some kind of envoy from Morphin Masters had discovered Gold Ranger on the bottom of the seabed, it had a very useful plot function for us, so it was worth bringing back. There are things that we like from prior seasons that we always look for. How can we accommodate that? For instance, the character of Mick, Mechanic, we're all very fond of, and Kelson Henderson has been such a loyal part of the Power Rangers world for so many seasons, and he's fantastic to work with. So we brought Mick back because he's funny. But he's also connected to the lore and the history of the show as well. So he's useful as a kind of mentor character.
I've got to admit, like seeing all the little bits and stuff, like it's made me look more at the episodes and gone, I like this more than like say, I don't know, a team up that happens or whatnot. I'm like, I like these things. Please put them in more, because it, like the whole thing, you had the SPD TV thing where it was just SPD. I was like, Nah, I get that. That's very cool. And then when J-Borg's been done from Overdrive, I was like, I like that. So yeah, I like it.
Cool. I mean, a lot of that is Becker and Alwyn because they have a much deeper knowledge of the history of the show than I do. When I came in on Ninja Steel, I knew nothing about Power Rangers. I knew kind of what it was. I knew what it was because I remembered when it had been banned from New Zealand TV because kids in playgrounds were fighting and being Power Rangers and injuring each other. That was many years ago. That would have been MMPR. But I'd never watched an episode, so I came into it completely fresh, which is another reason why it was such a steep learning curve. Like, what is this Zord thing? Do I have to direct one? Where is it?
Zord gun.
So have you actually have you just gone into like casting and gone, I want to put a suit on, and just gone, I'll wear that Ranger suit for a day, or just try it on, or a helmet at least?
No. As I said, I trained as an actor and decided I never wanted to act again. And for me, I don't think the world needs me in spandex, put it that way. I wouldn't mind putting a helmet on, and I have tried on helmets occasionally just to check out what the visibility is like for the people inside the helmets.
I see one right on your shelf. I see Mr. Sir Ivan.
Yeah.
There we go.
This is a stunt helmet. We have stunt and hero helmets.
Oh, sweet.
Can you see me? Because I've frozen on my screen. Am I still live?
No,
Yeah,
we
you
can see you.
Yeah.
Good.
So you can tell it's a stunt helmet because it's got these latches on the side. The hero helmets, which are actually much more polished and better looking, don't have the latches on the side. But these are the ones that they wear during fights because they're quick release should anything go wrong. And the latches are painted out in post-production. So that's what makes that a stunt helmet.
That's awesome.
They're incredibly expensive and difficult to make, the hero helmets.
Did not know that about the little clips there. So now I know what to look for when I see Power Rangers fighting. Like, I know you a stunt actor.
Yeah, so sometimes we miss them and they slip through. Or sometimes it's like only 2 frames and we think, no one's going to notice that, so we don't paint it out. But we do a lot of painting out of clips on stunt helmets.
Oh, that's awesome.
Sorry, dude, you got a question?
I don't. I thought we were taking turns. Go.
I have one here for it's one of our nerds who's not a part of the show today, but he said, what was your #1 pet peeve while working on the set?
Pet peeve? Did you say as in something that irritated me?
Yes.
It always irritates me when actors haven't put the work in, but I never had to deal with that on Power Rangers, so it wasn't an issue on this show. It's frustrating when you get behind on the schedule. Like, I always make it a matter of pride to try not to do overtime and to finish the day when we're supposed to finish the day. And sometimes things happen that are beyond your control. Like, there might be an accident on the motorway and some people can't get to set on time, so you have to wait for them. Or the weather's really bad and you have to spend a lot of time standing under easy ups or umbrellas waiting for the rain to stop. And I find that really frustrating because you just can't do anything. You just have to stop and wait. So that's my main pet peeve. I also really don't like it when I'm directing and producers are standing behind me watching what I'm doing, which is why I don't tend to do that to directors, because I know what it's like. It's you feel watched and you lose your spontaneity and become self-conscious. So I don't particularly like having behind the scenes crews following me around when I'm working either, because again, I start to become self-conscious and aware of the camera, which stops me being so in the moment. You also have to kind of self-censor if you're being filmed a little bit, in terms of the language you use and the things you say to people. Like, very often you give notes to an actor and you just sort of speak very quietly for only their ears. You don't really want other people hearing some of that stuff. because they
Do
don't
you
need to,
think
basically.
like little notes, like you said, is it going to like embarrass the actor, or do you think it's something that they should take to help to prove themselves to a scene? Because necessarily, even like, I need you to do it this way. It's not like they can't act; it's just not fitting the scene.
I think most professional actors who are, trained or have done quite a lot of work before know that it's just part of the process and are absolutely fine about it. But most people have egos. And for instance, if you're in a set that's full of extras, you don't want to say in a voice that can be heard by the entire room, your diction is really bad, I can't understand a word you're saying. I would say that very quietly to one side and just say, you need to articulate more because it's hard to understand you, and leave it at that. If it, same as if they might have missed an important story point. Like I might have to say, when she says that thing there, that changes things for you because you're hearing that for the first time. And that's one of the hardest things, I think, for actors on screen is they always have to respond to everything as if it's for the first time. No matter how many takes you do, or no matter how many setups, they have to try and find that freshness, that spontaneity, time after time after time. And more experienced actors or actors who have an amazing gift can do that spontaneously. Other people have to learn how to do it. And often with Power Rangers, you've got different levels of experience. Like the people who are cast very often come from dance or martial arts backgrounds rather than acting backgrounds first and foremost. So there's quite a lot of learning on the job involved for them. And again, that's fine. It's just part of the process. When I'm directing, a big part of what I have to do is find the language that is going to set off something in the actor I'm talking to's imagination, so that they change their performance in a way that fixes what I see as being an issue or a problem. I would never say there's a problem here, do it like this, because the worst kind of directing is when you are telling it or showing an actor how to do something, because they're the actor, not me. But the best thing I can do is plant a seed in their imagination that bears fruit, which delivers what I'm hoping for, and if I'm very lucky, even better than I could have expected.
You got a question, Sean?
Nah.
All right, so we're gonna leave this up here before we let you go, because Mark got a few questions about something he's been working on for a few years.
Yeah, but it was all from back in the day of 2015, which I now can actually work on properly. Okay, so to do that's okay. What do you think has kept Power Rangers going for so long?
Good question. I think the core audience of the show, which are kids, sort of 4 to 7 maybe, they constantly renew. Like every 2 or 3 years, there's another core audience of 4 to 7-year-olds. So there is always a renewing audience that is discovering Power Rangers for the first time. And I think the combination of that audience renewal factor and the fact that superheroes in brightly colored costumes fighting not too scary monsters and providing positive role models representing a whole range of different ethnicities and backgrounds is it's accessible and it appeals to a wide range of kids. I think the challenge is actually when the kids get older and Power Rangers stops being cool. And you'll always have your adult audience who watch the show from when they were young and remember it with the glow of nostalgia, and that is a particular way of doing the show. But people who didn't have that experience, who might be in their 30s or 40s, sit down and watch an episode of Power Rangers and they go, "What is this? I can't connect with this at all." So actually reaching an audience which is older than those 4 to 7-year-olds in a way that feels that it has integrity and isn't too corny and isn't too cheesy and is cool again, I think is the biggest challenge of all.
Yeah, I definitely agree. So I was gonna go, that leads into my next one, but then I think you've kind of answered it. So I'm gonna say that one just at the end. So when you were younger, what sort of fandoms were you into?
Star Wars.
I did love Star Wars. I was 12 when the first episode 4 came out, and I must have seen it 5 or 6 times at the movies. And I took my parents to see it, and they just didn't see what all the fuss was about. They thought it was complete rubbish. And I made Star Wars spaceships out of balsa wood, and I kit bashed. You know, I was a modeler. I used to make model airplanes and ships and things. So I had all these spare parts. I used to make X-wings and TIE fighters and Y-wings, and just from stills that I would get. And I even smuggled a cassette recorder into the cinema, and I recorded the whole film so I could listen to it at home. I was that level of a fan. So yeah, I loved Star Wars, and I was exactly the right age for it when it came out. And I loved actually Empire Strikes Back, which I think is even better than the original Star Wars film. Just loved it. But also I loved Monty Python. I was a huge British comedy fan. I loved The Young Ones is another show that I loved. But I also loved, Dennis Potter, The Singing Detective, and Edge of Darkness, which were 80s kind of very, very original TV series. Anything directed by Stanley Kubrick, I just adored. The Shining, Clockwork Orange, 2001: A Space Odyssey, Barry Lyndon, Full Metal Jacket. I'm a huge fan of his films. Broad range of stuff. I used to watch Space 1999 and Thunderbirds and The Tomorrow People, which because I grew up in the UK. I lived in England till I was 9, so I had all those English kids TV shows from the 1970s that were. I was a TV addict for a few years there. So yeah, all that stuff. Other science fiction. Just trying to think. I worked on another fantasy season, a show called Madigan's Quest, which was made for the children's BBC and 9 Network in Australia and TV3 in New Zealand. And that had Rose McIver in the lead, who then went on to become a Power Ranger. And I worked with Tracy Collins, who is the production designer on Power Rangers. She was the costume designer on Madigan's Quest. This was back in 2005. And it was a traveling circus troupe traveling through a post-apocalyptic world. Only 13 episodes were ever made, but everyone was in a different place, encountering different types of people and problems. And I loved making that show. That was a lot of fun. So those are all my kinds of touchstones. Terry Gilliam, like film like Time Bandits, I loved. I loved Brazil as a movie. That was amazing. Yeah, a few examples of things off the top of my head.
Yeah, that's so cool. So Thunderbirds and all like the young ones. Again, it's. And did you ever watch Blackadder by any chance?
Yes. Yeah, I love Blackadder, particularly the last one. I just think that the First World War season is just incredible. I love it.
Yeah. So why do you think Power Rangers has been so successful? Again, I don't know if that was very similar to why it's been going on for so long, but why do you think it's been so successful?
Well, it kind of relates to what I said before. I think it's core ingredients. Primary colored Ranger team, teenagers who are aspirational, fighting monsters to save the world. I think they are universal, and I think they work for the target audience of kids who are, say, 4 to 7, who aren't quite old enough to become cynical yet. So I think it reinvents itself every 2 years, and it finds a new audience every 2 years, and it is a unique thing because of that. It is such a mix of different pieces to the puzzle. When you look at the Sentai footage and the original stories and the look of the show and the aesthetic of it, it is its own thing. And I think that's why it's worked. Also, I think it stayed pretty wholesome, so parents are happy about their kids watching it. You know, it always delivers a message of some sort which is genuinely positive. It's not nihilistic, and the violence is pretty stylized and cartoonish.
Yeah. And one cheeky last question: what's been your most memorable moment in the show so far, Dino Fury?
My most memorable moment is in the final episodes, which I can't talk about. But we'll just have to wait and see.
Good one.
All I can say is we attempted stuff that I don't think, which has a level of ambition that I don't think has ever been attempted in Power Rangers before. And it was really exciting to do that. And then I spent many months making it work in post-production with our amazing post-production team, and I'm very happy with how it all turned out. So can't give away anything about story, but I can say that shooting some of that was my most memorable experience, and after it's become available to view, I'm quite happy to have another conversation after the fact.
I would love to have a conversation with you about it.
Now, because you brought up the elephant in the room, before we let you go, when can we see season 2, side B of Dino Fury?
I really don't know. I honestly don't know. I'm in the same position as all of you. I'd be very interested when they come out, and I'm sure there will be an announcement before they do come out. But yeah, I actually can't wait to see them again. I'm looking forward to seeing them on Netflix when they are uploaded.
Yeah, it's been a drought of Power Rangers. I miss them.
Yeah, me too. I'm with you on that.
But it's definitely been a pleasure. We know you got to go, so we ain't gonna hold you up. But we definitely gonna have to have you back once season 2 airs, because I want to talk about those last 2 episodes.
Great. Well, thank you for having me. It's really nice to meet you all, and keep watching.
I enjoyed.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Simon.
Okay. Cheers. Goodbye.
See you later.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.